My name is Johnny, and I'm going to give you 4 book recommendations about the Black experience. I am a Black girl who loves to read, and I think I have good taste, hopefully, so let's get into it. The first book I have to talk about is by none other than the wonderful, the talented Toni Morrison. Now, Toni Morrison is one of the great American writers. She is incredibly influential, and she's a Black woman who writes stories mostly, I want to say, I haven't read all of her books, but mostly about other Black women. The Bluest is the first book of hers that I ever read, and it's also her first novel overall, and it's one of my favorites. However, it is also incredibly sad and incredibly traumatic, and I feel like more people should say that when recommending this book. There's a lot of trauma. I would suggest maybe looking more into the themes before you buy and read this book. Getting into the story, The Bluest Eye follows a young Black girl in Ohio named Pecola Breedlove, and you kind of just grow up with her, and her life gets progressively worse and worse and worse the older she gets. And Pecola essentially hates herself. Pecola wants nothing more than to be white. She wants light skin, she wants blonde hair, and she wants blue eyes. She wants to look exactly like Shirley Temple. The book really talks about beauty standards and, Eurocentric beauty standards, and what it looks like when you have a young Black girl growing up in a society that hates her and tells her she is the pinnacle of ugliness and evil because people are insane and racist. Not only is Pecola ridiculed at school, but she also has a horrible home life. Horrible, so incredibly bad. However bad you think it is, it's probably worse. She is mentally and emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused. It seriously, it's insane. So because she has genuinely such a horrible life throughout this book, Pecola views whiteness as something that will solve both her internal and external problems. Not only will people think that she's beautiful and want to be friends with her, she wouldn't get teased at school anymore, not only that, but society as a whole would favor her, and maybe her parents would love her. I think the combination of problems with society and also problems with your family, I think that combination and viewing how both of those things affect a young Black girl is what makes this book so strong. There's a quote in the foreword that I'm going to read. Toni Morrison writes, "The death of self-esteem can occur quickly, easily in children, before their ego has legs, so to speak." I grew up in predominantly white schools, so I definitely understand growing up in an environment where what you look like is not considered beautiful whatsoever. But I never thought about how Black girls who grow up around other Black people can still have that same experience. So I think that's what drew me to this book. But yeah, if you want a book that is really beautifully written, also really, really sad and will probably make you cry, Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye might be the book for you. The next book I have is Passing by Nella Larsen, and Passing is about these 2 childhood best friends who grow up, and they're both Black, but they are white passing. So one of them, Claire Kendry, decides to live her life actively passing as white. She marries a white man who has no idea that she's Black, and she lives her life in high white society. The other one, Irene Redfield, decides to live life as an African American woman. She marries a Black man. She participates in Black society. Now, when these 2 women reunite later on in life, they basically become obsessed with each other and loathe each other and also hate each other, and it's just a really interesting relationship to watch. Claire Kendry, which is the one with a white husband, kind of starts inching her way into Irene's life, and she attends the Black dances in Harlem that she goes to, and she starts showing up at her house and talking to her Black husband, and ultimately starts to regret the decision she made for herself to live in white society and to marry an insanely racist white man. At the same time, Irene sees how Claire lives her life in high white society and how she really uses white privilege to her benefit, and sees how nice a life she's living, outwardly, because, racist husband still, but yeah, it's a very interesting relationship to watch unfold, and I just find their obsession with each other so interesting. And there's also a motif of a mask throughout the book that I find really interesting. Yeah. There's also a movie. They made it into a movie on Netflix, which I haven't watched because I don't remember the reviews being amazing. But I will watch it eventually. I actually want to reread it and then watch it. Also, I'm a film student, so my expectation for films is like all the way up here. So I almost don't want to watch it because I don't want to dislike it and then have that affect how I view the book. I don't know. It's a complicated relationship I have. The next book I have to recommend is yet again by Toni Morrison, but this time it's Sula. So adding on to the childhood best friend theme, Sula follows two childhood best friends from Ohio as they grow up, and one of them betrays the other. So this book follows two girls. They start out as girls and then we watch them grow into women, named Sula and Nell. Sula basically ends up betraying Nell in a really, really horrible and deeply personal way, and we watch Sula become the town pariah, essentially. And the back of the book says it pretty well, actually. Nell has grown up to be a pillar of the Black community, and Sula has become pariah. So the town really villainizes Sula, not only because she did something so horrible to Nell, but because she doesn't live up to anyone's expectations. And I think that specifically is what I find so interesting about this book and the character of Sula specifically. She does not care what anyone thinks of her in the slightest, and it drives her to do some really not great things, including what she did to Nell, but also just in life. She makes some pretty interesting decisions and lives her life in a very interesting way, and she just doesn't care. She does not care about what her grandmother thinks of her, about what Nell thinks of her, about what her mother thought of her, like literally anything. And she cares least of all about society's expectations. She does not care about finding a husband and having children. She genuinely could not care less. There's a quote on page 118 that I'm gonna read. She lived out her days exploring her own thoughts and emotions, giving them full rein, feeling no obligation to please anyone unless their pleasure pleased her. As willing to feel pain as to give pain, to feel pleasure as to give pleasure, hers was an experimental life. So I think the idea of a Black woman living an experimental life is really what drew me to this book. Because I feel like it's something we don't see a lot of, and there definitely are a lot of awkward Black girl / weird Black girl tropes in media, especially in film and television, but a Black woman living an experimental life, just really insanely out there, is something that I haven't seen. And I think that weird awkward Black girl trope really plays into Black women and what they do with other people's expectations on them. Because when I think of like the awkward Black girl trope, it's, you know, a Black girl wanting to fit into some sort of place in society and attempting to and failing, and the show or movie will kind of track how that goes for her. But I haven't seen anything about living an experimental life in the way that this book does it. So, quite the fan. I also really like this book because, again, it talks a lot about family, and Sula is a direct result of the environment that she grew up in, and what she did to Nell that was so bad, that betrayal, is something that her mother used to do all the time. So she gets it from her family. So yeah, if you want another book about two Black childhood best friends and growing up and finding where they fit in society or where they don't fit in society, then Sula by Toni Morrison is the book for you. My next recommendation is Open Water by Caleb Azumah Nelson. Open Water is contemporary literature romance, and I'm not a huge romance girl, but I thought I would take a stab at it. It's about a man and woman who are both artists in London, and they meet at a pub, and it's basically best friends to lovers. I think what drew me to this book is the fact that the love interests are both artists, and they're both Black artists, and the book talks about being a Black artist, which I find really exciting because I am a Black artist. I'm a film student. So the guy is a photographer, and the girl is a dancer. So throughout the book, there's just a lot of conversation about what it means to be a Black artist, and both of the main characters also grew up in predominantly white private schools, as did I. So I was like, whoa, this is literally my life, minus the falling in love in London part, but close enough. I find interesting that the entire book is in second person, so it says you, and it really places you into the story. I really like the conversation that the book has about being a black artist, and I'm gonna read a quote from page 13. The guy is basically talking about how it feels awkward for him to say that he's a photographer, and the girl's like, well, why? And he says, I guess it's like knowing that you are something and wanting to protect that. I know I'm a photographer, but if someone else says that I'm that, it changes things because what they think about me isn't what I think about me. And I relate to that so hard. I'm like, wait, like, I don't know. I'll be like, I want to say I'm a filmmaker, but then I'm like, ooh, because then people have what their expectations on what a filmmaker is, and it doesn't match my expectations, and I don't know. I just really related to that. Also, straight up on page 1, I really like the quote, love made you black, as in you were most colored when in her presence. I just thought that was cool. But yeah, if you're into romance, and if you're a black artist, and like reading about what it means to be a black artist, then Open Water is a book for you.